All right, let's talk about something that feels like it's been ripped right out of a sci-fi movie. Brain-computer interfaces. These are the devices that promise to do incredible things like heal the incurable and give people back what they've lost. But they also kind of open a Pandora's box of really tough ethical questions that make us ask, what does it even mean to be human? So meet Gertjon Oscom. After a spinal cord injury left him completely paralyzed, a BCI actually gave him the ability to control his legs again, just by using his thoughts. But listen to his ultimate goal. It's not about being a superhero. It's about something so profoundly human, just having a beer with a friend. And that's the incredible promise of this technology, right? Restoring the simple moments that really make life worth living. But why is this so critical right now? Well, look at this number, 9 million. That's how many people die every single year from neurological disorders. We're talking about everything from strokes to Alzheimer's to Parkinson's disease. The scale of this problem is just massive, and it's exactly why scientists are pushing so hard to see what's possible with BCIs. So let's start by looking at the good side, the incredible potential for therapy. This is the edge of the sword that offers a whole new frontier for healing. And look, the crucial thing to understand here isn't just the number of deaths. The biggest burden from these neurological disorders is actually disability. There's this measure of lost years of healthy life. It basically tracks the time people spend surviving something like a stroke or a brain injury, but they're left struggling to work or to communicate or just live on their own. This technology is aimed squarely at lifting that burden. And this whole issue has gotten even more urgent lately. Get this, a major study found that having a COVID-19 infection dramatically increases your long-term risk for these conditions. We're talking a 3.5 times higher risk for Alzheimer's, 2.6 for Parkinson's, and 2.7 for stroke. So we are staring down a future where the need for these kinds of treatments is going to be greater than ever before. Okay, so how do these incredible devices actually do what they do? Let's pull back the curtain and look at how you connect a brain to a machine. At its core, a BCI is basically a translator for your brain. It reads the tiny electrical signals your brain creates when you just think about doing something, it decodes them, and then it turns them into a command. And that command could control something simple, like a mouse cursor on a screen, or something way more complex, like a high-tech robotic arm. Now, not all BCIs are created equal. Different companies are taking wildly different approaches. You've got Synchron, which threads their device in through a vein, so it's much less invasive. Then there's Neuralink, which implants these tiny, flexible threads directly into the brain tissue to get a super precise signal. And another company, Precision Neuroscience, uses a thin, flexible film that just sits right on top of the brain surface. The general rule of thumb, the more invasive you get, the clearer the signal you can read from the brain. And this is the part that really shows you how far we've come. This stuff has officially moved out of the lab. Companies like Synchron, Neuralink, and BlackRock Neurotech are all actively testing these devices in human patients right now. We are at a serious tipping point. But that brings us to the other edge of the sword. Because once you figure out how to connect a computer to a brain, the question immediately becomes, how far is too far? This is the enhancement dilemma. Neuroscientist Dr. Deshane Murray frames this central tension just perfectly. BCIs are this powerful new platform, and just like any platform, they can be used for good, or they can be abused. And it forces us to start wrestling with some really, really difficult questions. So this really boils down to two very different paths. On one side, you have restoration, helping someone walk again, or communicate after a stroke, or treating severe PTSD. But on the other side, you have enhancement, improving your cognition beyond what's normal, removing fear, erasing bad memories, or even gaining a competitive edge. And the scary part is, the technology for both is surprisingly similar. Let's just play this out. Here is a scenario from the ethicist Dr. Matthew Lyo. Scientists are working on what he calls memory modification technologies, and they raise a huge question. What if you could choose to erase your worst memory? I mean, a truly traumatic event, a crime you witnessed, a profound loss. Should you be able to do that? See, Dr. Lau argues that messing with our memories has these really tricky hidden costs. It could literally cause us to live in a false reality completely disconnected from our actual pasts, and that could fundamentally change who we are. It could even mess with our ability to be moral people. I mean, how can you genuinely forgive someone if you can't even remember the sting of what they did to you? Okay, let's take another scenario, the military. They are, as you can imagine, deeply invested in this research. So the question becomes, should a soldier's fear be switched off? Is that a kind of therapy? Or is that turning a human into a weapon? So the U.S. military's research agency, DARPA, is funding a project called DBS Plus. Now, its official goal is to treat severe PTSD using a smart implant that automatically tweaks brain activity. But here's the slippery slope. That exact same tech could be used to stop a traumatic memory from ever forming in the first place, or to just switch off fear entirely. At that point, it's not therapy anymore, is it? It's pure human enhancement for a military advantage. So this all brings us to the choice we have to make, not in the future, but right now. This isn't some far-off problem. The technology is already here. And this quote from Dr. Murray really just drives the point home. The ethical dilemmas that we've only ever seen in movies and books, they are very quickly becoming real-world policy debates. The time for just talking about hypotheticals is over. And that's really the bottom line here. As a society, we have to start having these conversations proactively. Who gets access to this tech? How do we regulate it? How do we stop it from creating an even bigger gap between the haves and the have-nots? We have to start figuring this stuff out now, not in 10 years when it's already everywhere. So as we've seen, the potential to heal is just immense, but the temptation to enhance, to go beyond normal, is incredibly powerful. That line between restoring a person to health and augmenting them into something more, well, it's being drawn as we speak. So the question we want to leave you with is this: where do we as a society decide to stop?